Today we're going to walk through Ode to Joy, specifically the third line. And I'm going to show you how I would do, how I would approach learning this particular line, focusing on those eighth notes on the second and measure of the third line. So again, here's where our starting position is going to be. We're just going to work with the right hand, and our thumb, which is finger number 1, will be on the C, and that's middle C right here, hopefully right in the middle of the video. Second finger is going to be on D. Third finger is going to be on E. And then my fourth finger will be on F. And my fifth finger will be right here on the G. So I'm going to count this out. The first thing I would do is I would focus on the second and third beats. So, and this will be again in the second measure. So beats 2 and 3. And that's going to be the E, the F, and then back to the E. And the way I would count that is like this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So again, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So that was just the second beat on the second measure of the third line, starting with the E. Then I go to the F on the and of 2. And then I come back to the E on beat 3. So I just play 2 and 3. So I would just work that a little for a bit. And I might actually, once I get used to it, I might just start, instead of counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I might just say 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So you notice that I lift off when I say 4. I'm going to take my third finger off that E when I come to that fourth beat, which in this case is going to be the C, but we're not playing that yet, or I haven't played it yet. So now the next thing I might do is I might actually start on the first beat. Now the first beat is a quarter note, and that's going to be played on the D note right next to middle C. This is middle C, and there's the D, and I'll play with my second finger. So that's going to be on the 1, and then I'm going to have on the 2, I'm going to play the E, and then on the and of 2, I'm going to play the F. But we want to make sure that if we keep a steady beat, we should be able to discern the difference between the quarter note, which is a full beat, and then the eighth notes, which each comprise a half a beat. That's why we can play 2 and 3. So that's what we want to make sure we do correctly. So it's really the timing difference between the quarter notes and eighth notes. So I'm going to do it very slowly. I'm going to start counting in 3 and 4 and then I'm going to play the D on the 1, the E on the second beat, and then the F on the and of 2, and then I'm going to come back and finish this little phrase with the E on the 3rd beat. So very slow. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and now I'm going to finish off that measure by adding the C on the 4th beat with my 1st finger, my thumb. So now I'm going to play again the D on the 1, the E on the 2, the F on the and of 2, and then I'm going to come back to the E on the 3rd beat, and then I'm going to finish the measure with middle C with my 1st finger on the 4th beat. So if I were to count this out before I tried to play it, I would probably do this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So what I did was I tapped on every beat on which I am going to actually play a note on the keyboard. So this is very helpful because now I don't have to worry about the notes. I can just focus on the timing. And that's enough to focus on in the beginning, right? Because the timing is really harder than the notes. This is always going to be a D, this is always going to be an E, this is always going to be an F, and so on. But it's the timing that we really are going to spend about 95% of our time on. So I'm going to play it very slowly, and it's going to be the whole 2nd measure on the 3rd line. And I'm going to let me tap it out one more time. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So if I were to just play that with one note, let's just play that on the D, the timing. Before we start, if we're having difficulties getting these different notes in, then we just take a step back and we just work on strictly the timing. So I'm going to play that whole measure playing nothing but D notes, okay? But the point is, I'm going to play them on the beats for which I actually have to play a note or a key on the keyboard. So 3, and I'm going to cycle through it, okay? I'm going to play it once through, and then I'm going to go back to the beginning and start over with the 1, and I'm going to do that a few times. But first I'm going to count myself in, so I set a nice, slow practice tempo. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. A little bit slower this time. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So the timing, the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so forth, that never changes. We have to make sure that we don't deviate from the tempo, and we give each beat the same amount of time. So I'm always going to make sure that it's 1 I'm just going to play the keyboard on the notes during those specific beats that the notation, which is the notes on the scale, tell me to play. So now let's put this whole measure together. And I'm going to actually play the notes. But I'm going to play the notes just like I did in the last little piece that we just worked on, just the timing. Now I'm going to just apply the notes, but I'm still going to play all these notes on the same beats that I played that little timing exercise. So it's going to be like this: 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. A little bit slower. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So now what would I do? Well, I'd probably go to the measure, the first measure in that third line, and I would add the fourth beat. And the reason why I do this is I want to make sure that I don't have any issues with crossing over that vertical line that delineates the measure. Sometimes that can be a problem for students. We tend, when they hit that line that indicates that they've reached the end of the measure, they may pause. They're not sure what to do. So this is why I work on this myself, just to make sure that I'm going to carry that same tempo over from the first measure, and in fact through the whole entire piece. So now I'm just going to play a C, middle C, my first finger on the fourth beat of the first measure on that third line. So it's going to sound, and I'm going to actually add it to what we just played. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So now I'm just going to go back to the beginning of that measure and play the entire measure through the second measure. So you can see how we're sort of building out. So the first measure is pretty straightforward. We're going to play on the beats 1 and 2, we're going to play the D, and then we're going to play the E on the third measure, or third beat, and then the C, which we just played, on the fourth beat. So let's just play that measure a couple times, and then we will add it to the second measure. Actually, we're going to add it just to the first beat of the second measure. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and see what I did? I played the first measure in the third line through to the first beat, which is a D in the second measure. So now I've linked these two measures. So now all I have to do is put this first measure together with what we just worked on as we built out that second measure. So let's give that a shot. If you want, you can refresh yourself on that second measure, right? The second measure was 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so now we're just going to go in and add the first measure in that third line to what we just played here, which is the second measure. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 again. 1 and 2 and E, C, 1 and E, F, E, C. So again, I'll say the notes now for these two measures, just so you can kind of, maybe this will help. 3 and 4 and D and D and E and C and D and E, F, E and C. And now I'm going to add the counting again. Two measures, third line. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so now what I could do is I could add the third measure and we'll build out from there. So I'm going to take the second measure and I'm just going to go through the second measure and add the D in the third measure. That D is the first note in the third measure and that's going to be on beat 1 and it's also going to be played with my second finger on beat 1. So second measure through to the first beat on which we will play a D in the third measure, and that's all we're going to do. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 again and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 3 one more time and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3, so on and so on. Now the second measure or the third measure is pretty much the same as the second measure. So the third measure is very similar to the second measure in the third line, except instead of ending the measure on a C, which we do in the second measure, we play D, E, F, E, C. Now we're going to play in that third measure D, E, F, E, D. So the first measure we ended, the second measure we ended on a C, ended the measure on C on the fourth beat. But we're going to play all the same notes, except we're going to end it on the D. And that will be on beat number 4. So we're going to play measures 2 and 3. And these contain the eighth notes on beats 2 and the and of 2. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and so that's how I would play the two middle measures, measures 2 and 3 in that third line. And again, I like to cycle through parts that I'm having trouble with. So when we cycle through, don't forget we maintain a steady tempo. So when we reach the end of the part that we are working on, we want to make sure that when we start over again, that we don't miss the beat, right? So when I end on 4 of the third measure and play the D, I got to get back to the beginning of the second measure and also play a D on beat 1. But I don't want to pause. Again, I want to keep this steady pulse going. And that means no speeding up and no slowing down. And it does mean that we want to play it slow enough where we can do this correctly. So if it has to be super slow like this, doesn't matter. You'll just learn it. Actually, probably quicker the slower you can play it when you're learning. So I'm going to try that again at an even slower tempo, so you can try to play along with me. Measures 2 and 3 in line 3. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 okay, so that's how I would combine learning this tricky little spot here with the eighth notes, combining those with the other measures that are around before the little tricky part we have. So want to make sure that we can seamlessly go from the first measure into the second and third measures. And we want to come out of that too. So I might just do this. I might just play to come out of it on the other side, which would be the fourth measure. I'm going to start the fourth measure on a C, middle C. Then I'm going to come up to a D. This is a quarter note. And then I've got to come down to a G, which is going to be way down here with my first finger thumb. So let's just play the fourth measure, and then we'll combine it with the measure previous to it, which is the third measure. So let's just do this fourth measure now. And again, we have a half note that we have to play this G. So that means we have to take our hand and get down here with our first finger to play that G, which is the way we find the G is we have the 3 black notes. It's going to fall within the group of 3, and it's going to be right here, okay, right between the first 2 black notes. That's G. Okay, and that's 2 ledger lines down into the space on the staff. So let's play the fourth measure. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and say the notes C and D and G. 4 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now I would probably try to put these last two measures together, and then I basically have the whole thing wired. 3, so I'm going to start on the third measure and go into through the fourth measure, so measures 3 and 4 of line 3. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 1 more time. Go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And sorry, that was just the just the last measure. So hopefully that helps. I'm going to play the whole line for you now, starting from the first measure in the third line through to the end of the line on the fourth measure on that line. Ready? 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and sorry, let me try that again. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 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 3 and do it again. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 so hopefully that helps. But again, you don't have to try to conquer this whole thing in one lesson or one practice session. So you may just want to work on getting the second measure squared away in one practice session. And then your next practice session, and you may want to work on combining it with maybe the third measure or the first measure. But the point is you have to get the problem area down solidly before you move on. So don't be in a hurry. Get these two middle measures with the eighth notes in them. Get that timing very solid, and then just start building out like I did. Now over time, you're going to come up with the ways that work best for you, but this is probably how I would approach it. This is how I like to do it. I like to just take little bite-sized pieces. I like to make sure that I can go across measures before I try to play the entire measure that I'm going to. So in other words, if I started on measure 1 on the third line, I would want to make sure that I could get to that D on beat 1 in the second measure. So that would be this. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, sorry, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3. And that would probably be how I would work it. That's one possible way to do it. There's an infinite number of ways to do it, but the point is that you just take these little chunks, and the harder the piece is, the harder the section is, the more you want to make that starting chunk of notes smaller. So you can see we started working on the eighth notes, right? We started working on beats 2 and 3 and on the second measure. We made sure we could do this correctly. 1 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And then we added the D. 1 and 2. So the beat 1, the D, we added that to those 3 notes. 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And because there's really no point in going on beyond that if you can't play that as solidly as I just did. And again, the slower you do it, the better. And actually doing it this way is going to help you memorize the piece. If your goal is to memorize the piece, it's going to help you immensely in getting it memorized. So you're kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So hopefully that helps, and I'll see you at your next lesson.